We wanted to bring up somebody who is a partner of decisions, who understands automations, who understands the real needs of business, somebody who has been an excellent partner of ours in delivering value to you, our customers. But unfortunately, both Chris Mazur and Matt Scott weren't available to talk, so we opted for their CEO, Marc Savage. So Marc, if you just want to go ahead and come up, man, I'd love to have you speak to the team. I couldn't resist. I had to do it.
All right. So good morning. I'm Marc Savage. I am the CEO of Emprise Technologies, which means I'm the person that gets everybody in Emprise Technologies to do all the awesome things that they do. I'm going to talk a lot this morning about things Emprise has accomplished working in partnership with both decisions and with our clients. But before I go there, I feel compelled to give you some context about the person you're hearing this information from this morning. And I'm a little embarrassed to tell you this story, and I'm sure I wouldn't be telling you this story except that I have been home for the last year and a half with my 4 medium to small children and my wife of 21 years, none of whom listen to me at all. And so I feel compelled to tell you the briefest story this morning about who you're hearing this information from. And that story starts with me getting up this morning. I get up this morning, and I am, in my defense, 1/3 awake. That means I am out of bed by my standards. I have not taken a shower yet, and I have not had any coffee yet. So I am but 1/3 awake. And I go to the shower, and I guess I have probably been in a hotel room about 1,000 times in my professional career over the last 30 or so years. But I haven't been in a hotel room in the last 2 years. So I was a bit, I got to build some defense here because the rest of the story doesn't go very well for me. So I got to build some defense here, but I go into the shower and I turn on the water. I'm good so far, and the water comes out, and then I look. I have no idea what the next step is to make the water go through the head on the top, so I can do a proper shower, right? Which is critically important to me. So I'm looking there, and I'm looking at it, and I start pulling on stuff. I'm thinking, I probably won't bust it. And then I pull a little harder, and I think, I am going to bust this. I should not do any more of this. So I stop, and I do something that I never do. I decide I am just going to ask for help. And so I walk over to my phone, I find my glasses and put them on, and I call the front desk. And I say, I have no idea how to turn my shower on. And I think this is a pretty safe, we're not quite to the humbling part of the conversation yet. This is a pretty safe thing because this is just going to be between me and the front desk. No one would ever tell this story to 120 or so people. So that was never going to happen. So that was okay. So I call up the front desk and I say, I have no idea how to turn the shower on. And the person says, well, it's kind of hard to tell you, not being there. And I think I am in real trouble because I am significantly less attired than I am right now while I'm on the phone. Okay, so I'm significantly less attired, and I am starting to get concerned about where it's going to go. My hair is like this. That's kind of what happens. And just about that point, an angel reaches over and grabs the phone from the guy at the front desk. Perhaps she's more like the Mother Teresa of the lobby. So Mother Teresa of the lobby grabs the phone over, and she says something like this, honey, the button's on the spout, but it's kind of just blended in there, so it's a little bit hard to see. And after I get over that, I'm a little teapot reference that I've heard there. After I get over that, I start to think, yeah, all right, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be able to do this, right? And so then it happens. She says to me, honey, if you want to just go over and try that, I will stay on the phone in case you need some more help. And I stand up, and I think this seems like a pretty good idea to me. I stand up, and I get ready to go over, and I stop myself. And I think, do I really want to be that guy? Do I really want to be that guy that has to have the reception person, my Mother Teresa, on the phone while I'm going over to see if I can turn out the shower? Am I ready to be that guy yet? You know, I'm moderately mechanically inclined. Am I ready to be that guy yet? And the good news is, no. I am not ready to be that guy yet. So with great confidence that I have not yet justified, I pick up the phone and I say, no, I'm cool. I think I would be able to figure it out. And I hang it up and I go over, and I have been successful at turning on the shower. So the person in front of you is humbled and fully showered and not yet that guy. So that's who you're going to hear from this morning. So, okay, we got that. All right, the next slide here. Oh yeah, that's probably backwards. There we go. All right, so here's me. And I'm going to talk to you this morning about digital transformation. And I have a for-real digital transformation story to share with you this morning. The story begins with a company in crisis, one that compels them to change how they do business and transform their technology to make it happen. This company works for hospitals and for banks and utilities. They help those companies cure their consumer receivables. Simply put, they are consumer bill collectors. And if you want, it's okay, you know, they are my client, but they can be the bad guy in the story for you, okay? So these bill collectors, unfortunately, are in an industry that is very highly regulated. And this has allowed them to not embrace technologies that they normally would like to do. But in order to get this story going, in order to tell it correctly, I've got to take you back about 10 years. Okay, so here's what a collection call center looked like. There was what a collection call center looked like. I'm doing great with this. There it is. Oh, there we are. So here's what a collection call center looked like circa 2010, a little more than 10 years ago. It's centered on the CRM holding all of the data, the customer relationship management holding all of the data, and all of that feeding to serve the account rep, this lovely person over here, who would get information and make outbound calls in an attempt to contact consumers to get them to pay the bill on behalf of their clients. They would use complex telephony and dialers to make that happen, data enrichment services to take the data they had gotten for their clients and give them good contact information. On top of that, they're honor and legally bound to send letters out to those consumers saying, hey, this is the information that you owe, and this is what we'd like to talk to you about. But what might happen if people just stopped answering their phones? And they did. Contact rates after a repeated effort to contact the consumer had fallen up to the point of 2010 in a steady manner. But after 2010, things kind of go crazy. And there's this precipitous fall we see here, moving down from about 50% down to 30%. And these are contacts of consumers after repeated attempts. So what are these agencies to do? Their whole job is to contact the consumers and to get a hold of them. What are they to do? Are they to close up and go home? Are they to come up with a new strategy? We have seen an industry, the whole industry, devastated by this external factor that they were almost entirely unprepared for. It seems sort of obvious now, but they're almost entirely unprepared for. But there are some innovators, and we have been working with one of those for the last several years to get our hands around this problem. Now, the key to unlocking this problem is to understand that question, why are people no longer answering their phones? And I look out at this group, and I got to tell you, what I see is this group of consumers in front of me that would make a great group that we could ask this question to really get an answer. So I will put this question to our assembled group. You'll be kind of like a test study group that will help us answer that question. Does anybody have some insight for this esteemed group about why people no longer answer their phones?
I do. Because I don't need a car warranty.
You don't need a car warranty, right. So you don't answer the phone because lots of the calls that you get, you don't have anything to do with. I saw another one back here. You still don't need a car warranty, right. Okay, anybody else has okay, great, some insight? Right, you don't talk to people that you don't know. And how do you know when that phone rings that you don't know them? Right. Because back in the good old days, caller ID was not guaranteed, right? But now, on your phone, you get caller ID, and it's tied to your contacts, right? So you know if Bob's calling you or if somebody else is calling you. Now, just by a show of hands, how many people in this room will not answer their phone if they don't recognize the number? Yeah, so that's like everybody. So that's sort of the problem, right? So thanks for that great case study on what the problem is. You guys did a super job of figuring that out. So it's a two-factor problem, essentially. It's that there's been a change in attitude about how people communicate, but there's also been this remarkable change in technology, right? We went from you remember when phones used to be like wired into your house? You remember that? That's how it was when I was growing up as a kid. Well, that's not how phones work anymore. And they're not phones anymore, really. I mean, they're basically these very sophisticated computers that sit in your pocket and have all this information, right? So the technology has changed to such a point that now the telephone, as we knew it in the past, is essentially obsolete and entirely gone. So, before I get to that nice fella, one more piece about this. Make sure that I cover it fully here for you. The bottom line with the old process for communicating with consumers has changed because people just no longer want to be treated that way. You do not want those phone calls, and now you have the capacity not to get them, and you've voted with your thumbs or your fingers or whatever by hanging up that rather than accepting it. And that comes in a large way from the reality in the collections environment. It always has been this brute force push to engagement. And the brute force push to engagement has been pressing the consumer on the phone for a payment. What happens really is that the account representative on the telephone and the CRM feeding that information to them and by letters have come to hunt for the consumer. They corner them and then they demand a response. And when that breaks down, like it has, the whole process falls apart. So, the idea to start a transformation here, the idea to do things completely different came from a position paper that was sent my way about 3 years ago by the CEO of a large collection agency, one of the largest in the company. And when I first looked at this document he created, I was reminded of this fellow, Jerry Maguire. And Jerry Maguire came up with this idea that he was going to transform his industry. And he wrote this position paper, and it wasn't particularly well received, and hence goes the whole movie. So he wrote this Jerry Maguire-like paper to say, we're going to need to do, and his organization in particular is going to need to do collections completely differently. And what happened as a result of that is he wrote this paper and assembled a group of his internal staff, and they started thinking about how they might do that. And they thought about it, and they thought about it some more. And about 6 months later, when they had basically accomplished nothing, I got a phone call. And he said, hey, Mark, that document I shared with you about how we want to completely reinvent collections by surrounding ourselves with this cloud of this great fit technology and integrating that with our collection system, we had not made any progress on that whatsoever. And I said, well, what's your plan? I mean, I know you've identified these great technologies you're going to use. What's your plan to connect those technologies to your existing core system? They said, well, what we'd really like to do is we'd like to bolt that technology onto our system. And I said, that sounds like a great idea. What technology are you going to use to do that? And he said, we don't really know. We just kind of think, and I've used this term before, we just kind of think that there's some bolty bits on our application and on the solutions we want to use, and we ought to just be able to connect them together. And I said, well, have you found them? And they said, no. So we got involved, and in came Decisions as business process management tool, and also as the tool to give us this background connection layer to do orchestration of all these components. And that piece of the puzzle began the first phase of our project. But the story I want to tell you today isn't that story. I've told that story before. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to tell you, as Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story, what happens after we had met with good initial success, and then we wanted to evolve as the client need evolved really rapidly to ultimately begin to solve the problem of what to do when people just don't want to answer the telephones. Okay. So, as if Jerry Maguire wasn't enough, I will offer you this piece. Historically, collection agencies have been in the business of hunting for the consumer. And the sort of radical change in thinking, the shift that needed to be made, was a shift from the philosophy of hunting for the consumer to doing something else. If hunting isn't working, we just can't keep doing the same thing. So what we need to do then is perhaps shift our perspective so that we're shepherding the consumer. And the shift from being a hunter to a shepherd is a gigantic attitude change. So what does this actually look like in practice? It looks like casting a new vision. And this one takes the consumer out of the crosshairs and into the flock. Our goal becomes one of curating a positive digital experience for the consumer rather than wearing them down into submission. We support them now to manage their obligations and to remediate their credit standing. The account rep on the CRM focus becomes completely shifted towards a consumer needs focus. And from a technology perspective, we see a shift from the core CRM system to a consumer web portal, which feeds all of the needs of the consumer. So we do this in steps. First, we find a way to orchestrate and manage the data. We need a point of entry to facilitate new solutions working with the old framework. We need a way to bolt the new technology on. Enter Decisions as API orchestration and business process management automation. We use rules and business process engine, but we also do lots of orchestration here. Next, we expand the components of the solution. We bring on new services that begin to feed the need. But this is a minimally viable product step. This is MVP. What we're looking to do here is make this possible rather than awesome. Awesome comes next. And now we expand our services to give a full offering. But we're not done here. The components we've put in place and the ones that we've left in place aren't perfect. Matter of fact, in some cases, they are minimally functional. But we're moving. We've got it started. A future of ongoing component enhancement and replacement lies ahead of us. So this is digital transformation. It's accelerating the process of automation. To be clear, we're not rushing the process, because rushing the process is awful and just makes everything turn out badly. What we're doing is that we're automating at an increasing scope and across an increasing pace across parts of the organization. So here's a definition I found for you. I'll just read this. Digital transformation is essentially the digitization of both internal and outward-facing processes using technology to help a business improve operations and combat the growing threat of disruption. This definition makes me, and should make you, immediately nervous, right? What I'm left feeling when I read this is that I am behind and I have a lot of catching up to do. And I think, in many cases, that's absolutely a true observation. Success for our clients and for the broader world is tied to the speed and the quality of innovation. Think urgency. So, let's think about what's really involved here at a macro scale. We're altering how the organization accomplishes its mission. Digital automation has a disruptive impact on the organization as it alters all three core components of any organization. It alters people, process, and technology. Disruption means big impacts that cut both ways, providing both growth, which we need, but along the path, creating challenges. And a digital transformation project is not all awesome. The results are needed, and we do absolutely get there, but the experience has great friction. We've experienced, as will you, some amount of resistance at every step and from every quarter. So here are the big six that I was able to coalesce out of our recent projects in the last several years. The first one is data security. Orchestration of data and API management requires continual security audits to ensure stability. But even more so, the process of creating these APIs and creating the connections results in a real careful look into the existing points of connection. And what we find is when we do that, there are all kinds of data security challenges and messes. So what happens when you get to this phase, which is very, very easy, all the people who are concerned about security, which is everybody, stop and say, oh my goodness, we've got all this stuff to fix. Let's do that, and then we'll get back to our project, like in 3 months or whenever. So this is a major cause of friction. The other cause, the next cause is data integrity and master data management. This is a big challenge, and one that you don't have with traditionally siloed data that just live within one source. You've got fast-moving data, and it's not just fast-moving data. It's data that's updated from multiple sources. And so as part of your data digital transformation project, you've got to make sure that you spend a lot of time thinking about how that data gets orchestrated, but even more so, where the systems of record get created and how you make sure that by moving rapidly, you're not just making a mess and corrupting data. So the next piece I didn't have any insight for whatsoever when we began, and that's the required organizational change. Fundamentally, changing the way the organization solves problems means that the people have to work differently, and often that you need different people or new people and different reporting structures to actually accomplish this work. One secret, I think, is to have the philosophy of creating an operational center of excellence. So what's that? What it really is a group of people within the organization who get moved out of their traditional roles and into sort of a digital transformation SWAT team, if you will. And they focus on driving this forward, pushing through the organization to get the information needed and creating those solutions. The problem is, and this is I mean, there's kind of a lot of bad news on these slides, right? One of the big problems is those people that you need are the best people in the organization. These are these magic folks that have a skill set that spans in technology, with people, and also great operational understanding. They are busy, and the people who work with them are so busy that you really can't get their time. But you have to. So in the project that I'm talking about here, we found that after about 6 months of great impact when we were working, getting things done and pushing towards this, everything stopped. And I said, what's the deal? You know, we have these weekly meetings where we talk about this stuff. Why is nothing getting done? And this was, you know, I was patient for 2 meetings. But by the time we got to the 3rd meeting, I was like, why is nothing getting done? And they were like, well, you know, Brian's got a lot of other stuff to work on. Yeah, I know he's still got a whole other job, right? And periodically he's going to have to actually do that job, right? And indeed he had to. So I said, this has got to stop. We've got to either commit to this or not. And so I wrote an email. This is kind of and I do this all the time. I don't really know why I do this. You know, some people are just like this, but I am definitely like this. So I wrote, "You've got an ugly baby" email to the CEO and sponsor of this project. You know, which, as a consultant, you're never supposed to do that, right? You're not supposed to say, you know, what you guys are doing is awful, and it's never going to work, and your children are ugly and poorly mannered. You're never supposed to do that, right? Let's find some really great way to tell that. But, you know, I don't know what was moving through me that day, but I decided, no, I was just going to tell them. I said, how important is this project to your organization? You know, which is loaded with all kinds of ammo built into that. And he comes back and he says, this transformation is critical to business survival. And I said, well, you know, good, because that's kind of what I thought. I said, if it's critical to your business survival, don't you think we should actually do it? And he said, well, yeah, of course we should do it. You know, we've got all these people assembled, and we have all these meetings. I said, yeah, we get their timer in the meeting because they can't work on their other stuff while they're in the meeting. But all the rest of the time, they're doing other stuff. And so we pulled 6 of the most valuable people out of the organization. 5.5. The director of operations was never coming out of the organization, and we had to have him. So we pulled 5.5 people out of the organization into a center of excellence. And you know what? When they didn't have other stuff they had to do, they could actually focus on digital transformation. And you don't need to push at this point. You can be really flexible and really patient if you're on the digital transformation bandwagon until it stops. And when it stops, this is, in general, the answer. Now, further than that piece, the piece that sort of breaks my heart and saddens me the most is the next one. This is traditional IT resistance. So developers and managers of developers, all they want to do, and I think we probably have a few developers in the room, all they want to do is write code, right? And they would like to write code and solve problems using that code exactly how they've always been doing that, right? And when you come up with a transformational new technology, a low-code technology to implement that, it's not received positively by the people who just want to write code. It's just not. Now, some people are early adopters and they buy in, but, you know, it's really not the IT guys, right? But in order to solve some of the deep, impactful, scope atrocious problems we had to solve, we absolutely had to have the buy-in from the IT people. The sense I got from the IT people is that by moving from a low-code, from traditional development to a low-code, no-code environment, we were doing the equivalent of moving their sports team from their city to another city. And they were left in that city now suddenly without their sports team. This is an analogy for low-code, no-code. That's the sports team, right? So they were without their sports team here, and there was this just deep, abiding sense of somewhat irrational loss for them. You know, things just weren't the same, you know? And what they really wanted to do, rather than adopt this technology, was move to the city where their sports team is, you know? And that was a huge challenge for us to deal with. The other is an inherent change in, inherent component of rapid change management for the idea of actually doing a transformation. And that's that you never really know what the heck you're doing, right? The pace that you're moving and how you're learning to solve these problems is continually evolving. So as you get in the trenches to start to do this, you don't really know what you're doing. I mean, you know what you're doing, you know your job, and you're well qualified, and you're a capable person, but you're not great at the tools, and the problems are big, and you just have to keep going and keep moving while you're through that. Chris talks to me, he says, you know, this is a lot like building a plane as it's moving down the runway. And I said, well, yeah, I suppose that's true, but we got to build the plane, and it's moving down the runway, so we better just do it, right? The last piece is that what happens in an organization after this gets wings, after it gets legs, is that you get people outside of the IT organization doing some development and creating parts of the solutions. And that is empowered citizen development. And throughout the organization, that can be a gigantic challenge. It's like too many cooks in the kitchen, or it's like herding cats. The flip side is you've got engaged learners that are involved in making things happen. And you just really can't get much better than that in any organization. Okay, so here's how you know your digital evolution is actually transformative. It's when everyone consciously or unconsciously, overtly or indirectly asks, why is this so hard? And they do. Normally I just kind of see it in their eyes. They don't say that to me because they don't want me to talk about it for 20 minutes about why it's so hard. But seeing you're here, I'll talk to you for a moment about why it's so hard. One key reason why it's challenging is the scope of what you're attempting to accomplish. You're attempting to change how a business does business. And you're attempting to change how they use that technology to do that business. It's just big. And you've got these monolithic solutions like CRMs and purpose-built other technology that are meeting less and less of the need. And rather than attempting to just rip it out and replace it, you're going to try to create new connections into that environment and create a cloud of solutions around it that remediate it. So it's big, and that's a reason that it's hard. Another reason that it's so hard is that you've got lots of tools that are required to really do large-scale digital transformation. And those tools include some really cool things, and those include things like business process automation and rules engines, and they also include other components like robotic process automation that allows you to connect and automate technology. And one of the consistent challenges that I find is that the enthusiasm for beginning to develop solutions and to make them happen often outstrips the tools that are available. So there's new tools that are needed, and there's new pieces that you have to learn. Let me figure what the last one is. Okay, sure. The last one overlaps with the previous slide. There's a lack of clarity and know-how. There's sort of a lack of vision for where you're going, and it's so easy when you don't have clear vision to miss where you're headed. What's really going on here is that you haven't been good enough long enough yet. You haven't had enough time being a digital transformation creator to have gotten good enough to see a clear path of where you're headed. But the great news is, if you just keep on going, and if the team keeps on moving, they are going to build the skill set. And it suddenly will go from difficult deeply challenging, to standard operating procedure. What we find above all else, and if there's no other takeaway that you gather from me today, is that experience functions as the currency of digital transformation. Digital transformation grows and alters the organization. It grows the skills of everyone involved. It expands the tools that are available to solve problems and casts a vision for future automation. Digital transformation is happening, but it's not so much a no pain, no gain situation. Rather, in doing this work, you give the business processes, the people, and the technology the equivalent of a CAT scan, and that illuminates all trouble. You find diseased processes, indebted technology, and gaps in talent. But gathering the requirements and beginnings to execute shines a bright light into every corner of the organization. And it reveals, just like what you'd expect, both skeletons and heroes. So let's talk about some specifics. How does Emprise do digital transformation, and what's our methodology for making that happen? So this I can tell you, this is totally a stretch. This is what in our minds we think we're doing. I'm not entirely sure yet what we're actually doing and what all of the steps are that are involved. But if we look at this set, I think we'll move ourselves down the road a little bit. What it begins with is creating a proof of concept to solve some tightly defined problem that will have a real impact. This is a smaller is better, absolutely, but it's got to be large enough to be impactful. When we started this big project, we said, you know what we'd really like to do is we would like to just automate some pieces of their consumer web portal. What they've got now is awful, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't meet any of their needs. So if we could move that along a little bit, we could prove out all this technology, and then everybody would be on board to go further. So we did that proof of concept, and then we used the success in that proof of concept to cast a vision for automation throughout the organization. We didn't really cast the vision, we really did the work, and then we stood around in a room talking about the work that we had done. Not just us, but on the client side. And a magic thing happened in the room. People started saying, you know what? This stuff is cool. This decisions could transform how we solve problems within the organization. And I'm feeling pretty good about myself when this is happening, right? This could really change it. There are all these use cases we could use it for. And so you get everybody excited. And you use that excitement looking towards the last step to accomplish the absolutely critical third step. And that's to consolidate the gains you make in a proof of concept and build out some digital infrastructure that you can use. And Decisions is a great orchestrator of that digital infrastructure. You connect APIs and you build out a structure so that you've got the possibility to go forward and create more focused MVP solutions. And once you create those MVP solutions in this environment and this digital infrastructure that you've created, it's simply a matter of doing more and more and more until you find that you're suddenly in a completely different place. Like the hunter versus shepherd I mentioned earlier, digital transformation also requires a paradigm shift, a shift in thinking, and embracing a few key concepts. So here's my first key concept. You can tell I have small children, kind of gives it away, right? So this key concept is componentization. It's critical to understand just how much a drive towards components underpins automation and digital transformation. This illustration came to mind. The image on the left is a more realistic plane. But that's really all the advantage it has. It is purpose-built to do just what it does and therefore is unalterable. The plane on the right, the Lego plane, is more plain-ish than plain. You get what they're after. But the Lego plane can be altered, deconstructed, and rebuilt. From a future utility perspective, it is absolutely the clear winner. It's been designed, you see, to be the sum of its parts. When you've got discrete components that can be Legoized, that is connected together for evolving purposes in different ways, you've got a navigable path from the old monolithic solution to whatever new MVP that you're looking for. A new mindset comes with digital transformation, and it looks like this. Digital transformation is rough and ready, it's iterative, and it leverages the best technology available at the time with the least effort, at least initially. Remember, the goal here is to accelerate the rate and the scope of our overall digital transformation. But to do that, we need to get started. So again, there's urgency. So here's an example in the previous model. So if you weren't happy with the initial email service that you came up with, well, get a new one. Get a new email component and bring that component alongside and connect it to the solution. And after you test it out, you can decide to use the new one or the old one, or maybe even both is the solution. But we have to talk about APIs. APIs make digital transformation possible. Technology components get most of their real-world componentry, their black boxiness, if you will, from their APIs. The application programming interface shields what's going on inside the component from external intervention, but it also provides a point of entry to get data in and out of that component, and also to accomplish the work that the component needs to do. This is absolutely critical to reduce or eliminate the impact of component replacement. Breaking a monolithic solution into components, or even enhancing it with components, necessitates a round of APIs for everyone. In our projects, this is usually the first major design consideration, and it is a very illuminating activity. What that means is that if this design step is low in effort, then the project will be low in effort. And if it's not, it's a big red flag. Now, there's a shortcut. Because APIs themselves, from design through implementation into ongoing orchestration, are a big effort, and there's no denying that. Given the messes that are often exposed in the design process, they can also create major overall project friction. In some circumstances, an option is to just go totally cowboy and just wrestle the data out of the components. Just get them to give up their data without an API. So enters robotic process automation. What RPA really is it's citizen keystroke emulation. At its basic, it's screen scraping and script running. But what it can do for you is it can give you a quick and dirty automation endpoint without the need to fully develop an API. But we also use decisions in a more comprehensive way to create a solution from the ground up. Uh-oh, I think I went past that one. There we go. Emprise puts decisions at the center of our solutions. It's the workhorse for managing components, but it's also the glue that holds them together. But we've also created an independent solution in decisions to manage a critical problem we see in the marketplace, and that's the challenge of client onboarding. For our clients, this technology is a complement rather than replacing their existing approach. It's a digital transformation enhancement that runs alongside their core solutions. But for them, it's something of a shrink-wrapped win. It demonstrates the promise of decisions, which helps both of us, and it's often beyond the scope of what they could imagine. You see, the main barrier to digital transformation is a lack of vision to what's possible. Showing them the money, to briefly return to Jerry Maguire, or in this case, the automation, can be all that's needed to crystallize the vision and get the buy-in to get going. And once you're going, there's no stopping. So, that's our story. Hopefully this resonates with your experiences and generates some ideas and some questions. Thank you.